At Christmas dinner, my mother raised her champagne glass, beaming at my sister the way she always did when she wanted everyone's attention on Harper. "Harper's wedding was absolutely magical," she announced to the table. "So, Violet, when are you finally going to settle down?" A few relatives chuckled awkwardly. My father kept slicing the ham like his life depended on it. Harper sat perfectly still across from me, watching but saying nothing. Too quiet, too careful. I set down my fork slowly. "I already did," I said. "8 months ago. You all got invitations." The room fell into the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. My father's knife stopped mid-slice. "We never received any invitations, sweetheart." That's when I reached into my purse, and everything they'd been hiding came crashing down. Growing up, I learned early that my family operated on a system of hierarchy. Harper was the sun, and I was supposed to orbit quietly, reflecting her light without complaint. I wasn't resentful as a child. I just thought that's how all families worked. One daughter shined while the other made space. By the time we hit our teenage years, the pattern had solidified into something unmovable. My mother managed Harper's life like she was preparing a prized show dog for Westminster. Dance recitals, pageant coaching, piano lessons with the city's best instructor, a wall in our hallway dedicated entirely to Harper's achievements. When I won the county spelling bee or got accepted into the honor society, Mom would smile politely and say, "That's nice, honey. Can you help me pick out Harper's dress for the gala?" I didn't fight it. I adapted. I learned to anticipate their needs, to stay quiet, to celebrate Harper's victories as if they were my own. Survival meant not making waves. But then I moved to Portland for work, and everything changed. The distance wasn't dramatic, just 3 hours north, but it felt like crossing into another country. I rented a small apartment in a converted warehouse with exposed brick and windows that let in the kind of natural light my mother would have called unflattering. I worked as a dental hygienist at a community clinic, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered because of what I did, not despite what I wasn't. That's where I met Julian. He was a teacher at the elementary school next door, always stopping by the clinic with kids who needed checkups. He noticed me in a way my family never had, not because I performed or competed, but because I existed. He remembered the small things, how I took my coffee, which patients made me laugh, the fact that I was terrified of thunderstorms, but loved the rain. His family noticed me too. His mom, Diane, hugged me the first time we met and didn't let go quickly, like she actually wanted to hold me. She asked about my work, remembered details from previous conversations, made me feel like my presence added something to the room. His dad, Leonard, was the same way. They weren't perfect people, but they were present, and that was revolutionary to me. When Julian proposed during a walk through the rose garden on a foggy April morning, I said yes before he finished the question. We didn't want anything big. We chose a small garden venue, invited the people who actually knew us, kept it intimate and meaningful. But there was one thing I wanted desperately, stubbornly. I wanted my parents in Harper to be there. I wanted them to choose me, just once. I designed the invitations myself. Simple cream cardstock with our names in elegant script. I had them professionally printed, ordered 4 of them, and sent them via priority mail with signature confirmation, because I knew my family's history of losing things that didn't involve Harper. I tracked those packages obsessively, refreshed the shipping page a dozen times a day. When all 4 showed delivered, signed, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Then came the silence. No phone calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive comment in the family group chat.
Days turned into weeks. The wedding came and went. A beautiful, tear-filled afternoon with 40 people who loved us. And still, nothing.
I told myself stories to cope. Maybe they were planning a surprise visit afterward. Maybe they were hurt I didn't tell them in person. Maybe the invitations got mixed up somehow, despite the tracking confirmation. But deep in my gut, I knew the truth. Someone didn't want those invitations to be seen. I just didn't know how right I was until Christmas Eve. The silence after the wedding wasn't just an absence. It was aggressive, intentional erasure. At first, I waited. I told myself they were busy, that they'd reach out eventually. But days became weeks, and weeks became months, and the silence transformed into something that felt designed to hurt me. I tried calling my mother, voicemail. I texted my father. "Can't talk now, sweetheart. Later." Later never came. The family group chat, the one we'd had since I moved to Portland, suddenly didn't show my name anymore. I hadn't been removed dramatically. I'd been edited out quietly, like a photo cropped until the inconvenient parts disappeared. I mentioned it to Julian one evening while we were unpacking boxes in our new apartment. "Maybe it's just a glitch," I said, trying to sound casual. He dried his hands on a dish towel and looked at me with that expression he got when he knew I was lying to myself. Did they ever respond to the invitations? At all? I shook my head. "Let's check the tracking," he said gently. He helped me pull up the postal service records, something I wouldn't have known how to do alone. And there they were, 4 deliveries to my parents' address, all signed for on the same day in early April. The signature was unmistakable, Harper's looping, confident handwriting. My stomach dropped. Julian touched my shoulder. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" I couldn't answer, because the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Harper had always been the gatekeeper of that house. Mom trusted her with scheduling appointments. Dad asked her to sort the mail and screen phone calls. If something came through that front door, Harper decided whether it mattered. And my wedding invitations hadn't mattered to her. The timing clicked into place like a lock turning. I got married in June. Harper's wedding was in September, a massive affair with 400 guests, a designer gown, a venue that cost more than my annual salary. Her entire identity revolved around being the bride, the center of attention, the one everyone talked about. My wedding, even small and quiet, threatened that narrative. So she made it disappear. I needed proof, though, something undeniable. I pulled up the email logs for our family account, the shared address we'd used for years. Julian walked me through how to check the access history. And there it was, the wedding announcement I'd sent in April, open from an IP address tied to my parents' house, then permanently deleted within minutes. Harper's device ID was attached to the activity. Julian's voice was soft. "What do you want to do?" I didn't have an answer right away. Anger would have been easier. Rage would have made sense. But what I felt was something older and sharper. A wound that had been festering for decades, finally exposed to air. "Christmas is coming," I said quietly. "I'm going." Julian looked at me carefully. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "I'm done pretending." Christmas at my parents' house always looked like a Hallmark movie. Twinkling lights, a massive tree in the bay window, the smell of cinnamon and pine, plates of cookies arranged like art installations. But the moment I stepped through the door, I felt that old, familiar weight settle on my shoulders. The expectation that I'd play my role and stay quiet. Harper was already posing for photos by the fireplace with her husband, Nathan, adjusting the ornaments behind them like they were shooting a lifestyle blog. My mother fluttered around the kitchen, narrating every detail of Harper's September wedding to anyone within earshot. The floral arrangements, the live band, the custom cocktails named after the couple.
My father sat in his chair nursing a scotch, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with the holiday.
Not one person asked how I'd been. Not one person mentioned the wedding I'd had 8 months ago. It was like I'd never left Portland, like I'd never gotten married, like I didn't exist outside of this room in this role as Harper's shadow. I sat down at the dining table directly across from Harper. She didn't work at me. She didn't have to. She'd perfected the art of freezing people out without ever saying a word. Dinner started with the usual script: praise for Harper's dress, her decor choices, her new house, her upcoming vacation. Every sentence was a reminder of how they'd shown up for her over and over, without hesitation, while my own milestones dissolved into background noise. Then, my mother raised her glass, smiling brightly. "Harper's wedding was absolutely magical," she said, looking at Harper like she'd personally hung the moon. Then she turned to me. "So, Violet, when are you finally going to settle down?" The table chuckled. My father's knife paused over the ham like it couldn't decide which side to take. Harper kept her eyes on her plate, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. She knew what was coming. For years, I would have laughed along. I would have deflected with the joke, let the moment pass, swallowed the hurt like bitter medicine. But not this time. Not after everything. I set my fork down carefully. "I already did," I said. My voice was steady, calm. 8 months ago. The shift in the room was immediate. Forks froze mid-air, eyes widened, my mother's smile crumbled like wet paper. I let the silence stretch, then added, "You all got invitations." My father blinked like he misheard. "Violet, we never received any invitations." There it was. The lie they'd tell themselves, the story they'd already written in their heads to avoid accountability. I felt something inside me settle. Not anger, but clarity. "I figured you'd say that," I said, softly. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The screen glowed in the candlelight as I set it on the table. Every pair of eyes locked onto it like it was a ticking bomb. This was the line I'd never crossed, the boundary I'd never drawn, the moment I stopped letting them rewrite my story. I opened the tracking receipts, my hands steadied despite my racing pulse, and turned the phone so everyone could see. 4 deliveries. 4 signatures. All received. And at the bottom of the first receipt, unmistakable and damning, was Harper's signature. My mother gasped. My father leaned forward like he needed to see it close up to believe it. Nathan stiffened, his eyes darting between the screen and his wife like he'd just discovered a stranger sitting next to him. Harper didn't move. Not a flinch, not a blink, just frozen. These were delivered on April 18th. All 4 invitations, signed for by Harper. The silence wasn't surprise this time. It was exposure. My father's voice came out hoarse. "Violet, this has to be a mistake." "It's not," I said. I swiped to the next screenshot. "This is the log from the Postal Service. Priority mail, signature required. All confirmed." I paused, then added quietly, "All intercepted." My mother shook her head rapidly. "No, that doesn't make sense. Harper wouldn't—" "Stop," I said. Not harshly, just firmly. "You always say what Harper wouldn't do, but you never look at what she actually does." That landed. My mother froze, her mouth open, words dying on her tongue. Nathan finally spoke, his voice tight. "Harper, did you sign for these?" Harper's face was blank, mechanical. "I don't remember. I grab the mail sometimes, but I never saw any wedding invitations." Silence. I let it stretch, let it breathe, let it do the work for me. My father stared hard at Harper. "You didn't notice 4 packages from your sister around the time you knew she was engaged? It's not my job to track everyone's mail."
Harper snapped, her composure finally cracking. Wrong move. My mother reached toward her. Sweetheart. No, I said, quietly. Let her talk. She's been talking for years. Let's hear it now. Harper glared at me, her jaw tight. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. Instead, I swiped to the final screenshot. The email activity log Julian had helped me access.
This, I said, is the log for our family email account. The wedding announcement I sent in April was opened from this house, then deleted immediately. My father's face went pale. Who has access to that account? Everyone knew the answer. Everyone had always known. Harper's voice pitched higher. I didn't delete anything. I tilted my head. Then why does it show your device ID? Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I maybe clicked it by accident. I don't know. Why are you doing this? Why are you attacking me? I'm not attacking you, I said. I'm showing you what you did. My mother's voice trembled. Why would Harper hide your invitations? Why would she do something like that? It's absurd. And there it was. The defense she'd been polishing my entire life. The shield she held up every time Harper left a mark. Why? I repeated. I looked at Harper. Because my wedding was in June. Yours was in September. You didn't want anyone talking about mine before yours. Harper flinched like I'd struck her. That's insane, she hissed. You always do this. You twist everything to make me look bad. No, I said. You did that yourself. Nathan's chair scraped loudly as he stood. Harper, is this true? She stared at her napkin, her hands shaking. This isn't... Everyone always thinks Violet is so perfect. She never asks for anything. She never demands attention. She just exists and makes everyone feel... Feel what? I asked softly. Her head snapped up. Guilty. Small. Like she doesn't even have to try, and I'm still not enough. There it was. Not a confession about the invitations, but a confession about everything that came before. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of Harper's words settling over the table like ash. I said, so you hid my wedding because it was small, because it didn't compete with your designer gown and your 400-person guest list? That's not... Harper's voice broke. She pressed her palms against the table like she needed something solid to hold on to. But the truth was already hanging in the air between us, undeniable and raw. Violet, my father said desperately, his voice strained. We didn't know. If we had known, we would have... You would have come? I finished for him. After missing how many birthdays? After forgetting how many milestones? After making sure Harper's needs always came first? He closed his eyes like the truth was too bright to look at directly. My mother's face twisted with something between guilt and defensiveness. You can't put all of this on us. We did our best. No, I said, my voice steady. You did your best for Harper. For me, you did the bare minimum and called it fairness. Harper sank into her chair, her shoulders collapsing inward. Even she couldn't argue with that. The weight of decades pressed against my chest, not as pain anymore, but as clarity. I looked at each of them, the people I'd spent years quietly begging to see me, and I finally told them the truth they never wanted to hear. I didn't lose my family tonight. I just stopped pretending I had one. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Violet, don't you dare say that. Why not? I asked. Because it threatens the story you built? The one where Harper is perfect, Dad stays neutral, you keep the peace, and I'm the problem for noticing? No one said you're the problem, my father whispered. You didn't need to say it. You showed it, over and over, for my entire life. Nathan sank back into his chair like he was watching the foundation of his marriage crack in real time. His face had gone pale, his eyes locked on Harper like he was seeing her clearly for the first time.
Violet, please. Harper's voice was small, desperate. Nothing like the confident woman who'd walked through the door hours earlier. That single word, please, carried years of fear, years of guilt, years of realizing that control wasn't the same as connection. I stood slowly, the legs of my chair scraping softly against the hardwood floor. "I'm done begging for a place at this table," I said. "I'm done asking you to show up. I'm done pretending Harper's choices don't hurt me. I'm done accepting your silence as anything but agreement." I took a breath, felt the words settle into truth. I'm done. My father stood too, reaching toward me like he could physically stop me from leaving. "Violet, please don't go. We can fix this. We can talk." "We are talking," I said, for the first time and for the last time under these conditions. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We can make this right. You can't fix what you refuse to acknowledge," I said, "and you've refused for years." I picked up my coat from the back of my chair, feeling lighter with every movement. As I pulled it over my shoulders, I heard Harper sob quietly. I heard my mother whisper my name like a prayer. I heard my father say, "We should have checked. We should have asked." But their remorse wasn't mine to carry anymore. I walked to the door, the Christmas lights blurring slightly in my peripheral vision. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, turned back one last time. "You didn't miss my wedding. You chose not to see it." Then I stepped outside into the cold December air, letting the door close behind me with a soft, final click. Not a slam, not drama, just a boundary, clean and clear, drawn at last. And for the first time in my life, the silence that followed felt like freedom. Julian was waiting by the car, leaning against the passenger door with his hands in his pockets. One look at my face, and he didn't ask what happened. He just opened his arms, and I walked into them, letting him hold me until the shaking stopped. No questions, no judgment, just presence. The thing my family had never learned to give. We drove back to Portland in comfortable quiet, his hand resting on mine, the city lights blurring past the windows like falling stars. When we got home, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just exhaled, long and slow, like I'd been holding my breath for 29 years. I slept better that night than I had in months. No anxiety dreams about family gatherings, no waking up at 3 a.m. wondering if I'd said too much or not enough. Just deep, dreamless sleep, the kind that comes when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours to begin with. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and found Julian making pancakes in our tiny kitchen, humming along to the radio. He turned when he heard me, smiled that soft smile that always made me feel seen, and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Cooper." I wrapped my arms around him from behind, pressed my face against his back, and just breathed. "You okay?" he asked gently. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. An hour later, his parents called and invited us over for breakfast. "Nothing fancy," Diane said on the phone. "Just want to see you both, make sure you're okay." When we arrived, Leonard was setting the table, and Diane was pulling a casserole out of the oven. The kitchen smelled of cheese and herbs and warmth. And when Diane saw me, she set down the dish and pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than politeness required. "I'm glad you're here," she said into my hair. We sat around their table, a small, slightly wobbly table that didn't match their chairs, and ate scrambled eggs and toast and talked about everything except what had happened the night before. They didn't press, they didn't pry, they just made space for me to exist without explanation. Finally, as Diane refilled my coffee, she said, "You know, family isn't just the people you're born to, it's the people who show up. And we show up for you, Violet, always." Leonard nodded, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "We've always been family to you, Violet. We're just glad you know it now."
I felt tears prick my eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were the kind that came from being seen, really seen, by people who had no obligation to care but chose to anyway. "Thank you," I whispered. Diane smiled. "No thanks needed, sweetheart. That's just what family does." The days after Christmas passed in a strange mixture of peace and processing.
I went back to work at the clinic, fell into the familiar rhythm of appointments and cleanings, and found comfort in the routine. My coworkers asked how my holiday was, and I gave them the short version. Complicated, but necessary. Simone, my closest friend at work, pulled me aside during lunch. "You okay? You seem different." "Different how?" I asked. "Later," she said. "Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore." I thought about that. Maybe I'm not. She squeezed my shoulder. "Good. You deserve to be light." A week after Christmas, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Harper's name appeared in my inbox, and for a moment I considered deleting it without reading, but curiosity, or maybe closure, made me open it. The email was long, paragraphs and paragraphs of careful, measured words. She talked about starting therapy, about recognizing patterns she'd never seen before, and about how she'd spent her whole life feeling like she had to be perfect or she'd disappear. She admitted hiding the invitations, admitted deleting the email, admitted that my quiet existence had always made her feel like her loud one was too much. "I was threatened by you," she wrote, "not because you did anything wrong, but because you didn't have to perform to matter. You just existed, and people liked you. I had to work so hard for every scrap of attention, and you just were. And somehow that felt like you were winning something I didn't even know we were competing for." She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask me to come back. She just said, "I'm sorry. I'm working on it. You didn't deserve any of this." I read it twice, then closed my laptop. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but because some apologies are just acknowledgments, not bridges, and acknowledgement doesn't erase decades of harm. Maybe one day I'd be ready to respond. Maybe not. Either way, it would be my choice. My father started calling every few days. Not long calls, just 10 or 15 minutes where he'd ask how work was, how Julian was, if I'd seen any good movies lately. He didn't apologize directly, didn't make grand promises about changing. He just showed up, consistently, in small ways. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after Christmas, he called and said, "I found something." "What?" I asked, stirring sugar into my tea. "One of your wedding invitations. It was in a box in the erasure, buried under some old tools. I think Harper hid them there." My hand stilled on the spoon. "Oh, I'm mailing it to you," he said quietly. "Not because I expect anything, just because you should have it. You should know that I see now, that I should have looked harder." "Dad, I'm not asking you to forgive me," he interrupted gently. "I'm just asking you to know that I'm trying, that I see what I didn't see before, and I'm sorry." The invitation arrived 3 days later in a plain manila envelope, no note attached, just the cream cardstock I'd designed so carefully, now wrinkled and stained with oil, evidence of everything I'd already known. I held it for a long time, tracing my fingers over Julian's name and mine, over the date that had come and gone without them. Then I tucked it into a drawer, not to forget, but to remember. To remember that I'd been right, that the silence had been a choice, that I hadn't imagined it. My mother never called, never texted, never acknowledged what had happened at all. And for the first time in my life, that silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like an answer. Some people can't admit they were wrong. Some people would rather lose you than face themselves. That wasn't my burden anymore.
Spring came slowly to Portland, the city blooming in shades of pink and white as the cherry trees opened their blossoms. Julian and I planted herbs in pots on our small balcony, basil and thyme and rosemary, and I found unexpected joy in watching things grow. One Saturday in April, we hosted a dinner party. Nothing elaborate, just pasta and salad and wine, with Diane and Leonard, Simone and her girlfriend Maya, and Julian's college roommate Derek, who'd become one of my closest friends too. We crowded around our small dining table,
chairs mismatched and elbows bumping, laughter spilling over into the kitchen where I was draining pasta. Leonard told a terrible joke about a priest and a rabbi that made everyone groan. Diane insisted on doing the dishes despite my protests. Simone and Maya debated the best hiking trails outside the city, while Derek tried to convince Julian to join his trivia team. At one point, Diane raised her glass and said, "To family, the ones we choose and the ones who choose us back." Everyone clinked glasses, and Julian's hand found mine under the table, warm and steady and sure. I looked around at these people, these beautiful, imperfect, showing up people, and felt something settle in my chest. Not the ache of longing I'd carried for so long, but contentment, belonging, home. This was family. Not the one I'd been born into, but the one I'd built, the one that showed up, the one that stayed. Last month, Julian and I celebrated our first anniversary. We went back to the rose garden where he'd proposed, walked the same winding paths we'd walked a year earlier, the air sweet with blooming flowers and possibility. "Do you regret it?" he asked, as we sat on a bench overlooking the water, walking away from them. I thought about it, really thought about it, weighing the loss against the peace I'd found in its place. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it took me so long." He pulled me close, and we sat there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the world stretching out before us, full and open and ours. I'd spent so many years trying to earn love from people who'd already decided I wasn't worth the effort. I'd twisted myself into impossible shapes, hoping that if I became small enough, quiet enough, undemanding enough, they'd finally see me. But you can't make people love you the way you deserve to be loved. You can't force them to show up. You can't convince them to choose you if they've already decided not to. All you can do is choose yourself. Draw the line, walk away, and trust that on the other side of that fear and guilt and obligation, there's a life waiting, a better one, a truer one, a life where you don't have to beg for crumbs. That's the life I've found, and I am never going back. A few weeks ago, Harper texted me. Just one line. "I'm still in therapy, still working on it. I hope you're happy." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "I am." I didn't say more than that. I didn't need to. It was the truth, simple and complete. My father still calls every week. We talk about small things, his garden, my work, a book he's reading. It's not the relationship I wished for as a child, but it's honest, and that matters. He's trying, in his way, and I've decided that's enough for now. My mother remains silent. I've stopped waiting for her to reach out. Some people can't change. Some people would rather hold on to their version of the story than face the truth. And that's her choice to make, just like it was mine to walk away. I don't hate them. I don't wish them harm. I just don't need them anymore. And that realization, more than anything, feels like freedom. If you're reading this or listening to this, and any part of it feels familiar, if you've been the overlooked one, the forgotten one, the one who kept shrinking to make room for everyone else, I want you to know something. You're not asking for too much. You're not too sensitive. You're not the problem. You deserve people who show up, people who remember, people who make space for you without you having to disappear first.